people's champion, champion, champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice.
Happy Tuesday, happy Tuesday. Welcome to another episode of Let's Start Justice with the JFJ team. Thank you so much for tuning in with the organization. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ. This week, Jade Williams, our Policy and Advocacy Specialist, is out representing the organization at a meeting, and therefore I will be flying solo for a few minutes. But to join us in studio is Mr. Hugh Faulkner, who is the Commissioner of the Independent Commission of Investigations, commonly called Indecom. So we're going to be speaking with Mr. Faulkner today on the last quarterly report released by Indecom, but we're going to be focusing on some specific aspects of that report, the state of the lockups in terms of how detainees are treated, the number of deaths in lockup, medical care. We're also going to be looking at the number of fatal shootings by law enforcement, and where are those elusive body cameras that we keep hearing about, but apparently they're not being effectively utilized by law enforcement. So those are the broad issues that we're going to be touching on. But before we get into the substantive topic, just want to do our human rights recap of the week. And the country is plunged in mourning yet again. Another week when we look at the high levels of crime in the country. But I think what is alarming for us, on today's Gleaner, the front page, we saw the headlines wherein a 6-year-old was killed last Friday in Kingston. And we saw another incident that happened yesterday, I believe, in Salt Spring down by St. James. And for those who are keeping up with the news cycle, you would recognize that Salt Spring is one of those communities that we would call high risk or at risk based on the criminal elements that have been plaguing the citizens there. There would have been Zozo, SOE called in that particular area. I know the area is also being supported through the Project Star initiative, and I'm happy that the police force, they're pushing back and saying that we won't be deterred by this, but it does bring into light, one, the importance of really managing the crime situation in the country. And as you can imagine, unsurprisingly so, there are calls from the citizenry that we should have the harsh penalties and so on. And I won't comment on those because I think when people are angry, they will understandably be making those calls. But our condolences to the family, because potential future leaders have been taken from us. So, yeah, we pray for those who are praying people, and we hope that we will see the crime situation really dealt with in the country. So we continue to watch that. As I stated, we're going to be joined by Mr. Faulkner, but there were two issues that I wanted to bring to light. You're aware that the Integrity Commission Act, the Joint Select Committee reviewing that particular legislation, as well as the other 3 pieces of legislation that focuses on mandatory minimum for murder. That's the Child Care and Protection Act, looking at the 20-year mandatory minimum for children who commit murder. We have the Offences Against the Persons Act and the Criminal Justice Administration Act. So all 3 accompanied pieces of legislation would guide the discussions around mandatory minimum. I just want to quickly highlight some things. Under the Integrity Commission Act, last week I heard a recommendation coming out of the Joint Select Committee that they want to put in some term limits on the executive director. And to today's day, I'm a little bit confused about the justification or the reasoning behind the Integrity Commission, the Joint Select Committee rather, to be focusing on the executive director. As we've repeatedly said here at JFJ, the Integrity Commission was changed from the one-man band approach, the ombudsman model of the Office of the Contractor General, to now having a collegial model. And when already in law you have the commissioners being able to serve an initial 7-year with the possibility of renewal, the executive director serving 5 years with the possibility of renewal, when you have the powers being divested from what was the contractor general to know a significant amount of the powers in terms of those who provide oversight of the director of investigation, corruption, prosecution, and so on, being vested in the commissioners, I can't help but wonder, why is the Joint Select Committee focusing on the executive director who no longer holds those powers rather than the commissioners? And the thought comes to mind that our Joint Select Committee, in a misguided path, is focusing on the executive director, it seems, by what they deem, personal and emotional feelings coming into this, rather than being guided by the provisions in the legislation and being guided by public policy. We're not hearing that the commissioners should also have fixed terms. We're focusing on the executive director who no longer holds the substantive power, if you will, of the Integrity Commission. Is this a personal vendetta, whether mistakenly so, by the Joint Select Committee? Why not broaden the scope for term limits? Well, Julian Robinson, one of the members, noted this. But I can understand why we're not focusing broadly on the commissions of Parliament, your Auditor General, your DPP, those entrenched institutions in the Constitution. You're focusing on the Executive Director, whose responsibility is for operational oversight. So again, our appeal to the Joint Select Committee, focus on public policy, best practices, rather than actions of the past that are no longer relevant within the context of the current Integrity Commission Act. The other thing I want to point out under the legislation looking at the mandatory minimum, last week the committee agreed that for capital murder, they will impose an automatic 50-year sentence to be served before parole eligibility. And they agreed for 30 years for non-capital. They are meeting today, I believe. I think the meeting is just about to be concluded. I haven't watched it yet. But they are to discuss the matter for children. And again, one of the members, Senator Shireen Golding Campbell, asked the question, why are we doing this? What data is driving the Joint Select Committee? Notwithstanding that answer not being provided for, you found people voting, unsurprisingly, along party lines on this particular matter. Now, for any Joint Select Committee meeting, we know that they won't necessarily take up all the recommendations that JFJ or others are bringing forward. And that's quite fine. But we're hoping that the recommendations are looked at soberly and impartially, guided by public policy again. And that would be my caution to the Joint Select Committees of Parliament. Now we have the right of the day. So let us just quickly go through that. The right of the day comes from the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, specifically Section 13. And it says the right to protection from torture or inhumane or degrading punishment or other treatment. And I think Jade, who chose this right, did so aptly, because it is quite a timely one within the context of today's discussion. Because I think far too often, again, when the crime rates are high, we're so quickly to give up our rights that we don't recognize the implications of what we're seeing as citizens. So the right of the day comes from Section 13, and I want to encourage every single Jamaican citizen to go and read your Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, be au fait with the Constitution, as the supreme law of the country that guides us and ensures that our very human dignity is so provided for. Our trivia for the day, it asks, what year did the Independent Commission of Investigation Act commenced? So what year did the Indecom Act commenced? So I hope you can go on our social media platform and answer that question so that we are so guided and we can have the discussions again. And Mr. Faulkner, I'm sure will be quite proud when you answer that question correctly. Now, to just give you the substantive preview of today's discussion, which is focusing on Indecom's quarterly report, state of lockups, fatal shootings, and body-worn cameras, to point out that on October 24, Indecom tabled its second quarterly report to Parliament, and the report focused on a review of deaths in custody of JCF lockups between 2021 and 2022. The report also indicated that the number of police deaths in custody in the 2-year period was 14, while the number is relatively low. The circumstances surrounding those deaths could be cause for concern. The continued deplorable conditions of the lockups is another key finding of the report. It stated that they are frequently overcrowded, unsanitary, lacking in sufficient airflow, and affected by other issues, all of which can be contributory causes to the exacerbation of illnesses in prisons or of prisoners who were already suffering. The Commission further reported that in the second quarter of 2023, there were a total of 53 incidents involving citizens either being shot or killed or shot and injured. It is worth noting that 8 of the individuals involved were identified as having mental health issues. Out of the 53, 36 resulted in fatalities, while 17 individuals sustained injuries. An ongoing concern pertains to insufficient availability of body-worn cameras, both in planned and unplanned operations, leading to the incidents resulting in death or injury. Now, when we're joined by Mr. Faulkner, we're going to be probing what footage perhaps Indecom got from the law enforcement to get an understanding of whether or not those body-worn cameras that we hear being reported coming into the island and so on, how many of them were actually deployed, are being worn, the status of the guidelines governing the body-worn cameras, and again, how many incidents that Indecom got reports on, they actually received footage as well. So Mr. Faulkner is here with us in studio, but we haven't connected him as yet. But when we take the break, we will continue the discussion with Mr. Hugh Faulkner, Commissioner of Indecom. We take the break.
Listen up, Jamaica. At Fosrich, everybody's getting a solar water heater. $20,000 deposit. 6 months to pay. What a deal! Fosrich Financing. Call us 876-937-5099.
We all know the benefits of drinking water and keeping the body hydrated. Drinking alkaline water helps improve the blood's viscosity, which in turn helps the blood flow more efficiently through the body. DK Spring Water is alkaline water. DK Spring Water, bottled at the head of the springs in pristine Buff Bay, Portland. Available in 280 milliliters, 500 milliliters, 1.5 liter, and 5-gallon bottles. Call 627-9114 to order yours today. DK Spring Water. Taste it, know it, love it.
Yeah, man, this is Graham Smog, and whenever I'm rolling through Jamaica, got to keep my radio locked to the bridge. 99 FM, keep it locked. I have some reggae and dancehall music live, see?
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans, by justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice, and thanks for tuning into the show. By the way, if you have any comments, you can WhatsApp us at 239-7583, or you can call the studio lines at 676-4996, and we can accept those calls at 1:45. Mr. Hugh Faulkner, the Commissioner of Indecom, joins us to discuss their quarterly report. Thank you so much, Mr. Faulkner.
Right, it's my pleasure, Ms. Jackson. And good afternoon to your listeners and to your technical operator.
We appreciate you. Now, let me just put in context, and you can correct me if I have these numbers incorrect. 2020, 119 fatal shootings. 2021, 127. 2022, 139. And year-to-date, 2023, 119.
Yes, which is 2 more than the year-to-date figure for 2022. So it was 117 at the start of November 2022 and 119 at the start of November 2023.
So if you're to follow the math, not saying that there is any shorty in terms of what the math says, but what it is indicating, if we follow this trajectory, we may reach as high as 140 at the end of December.
Right. So it's somewhat a little bit difficult to follow the monthly pattern because last year, October was a peak. This year, not quite the same, and then a lull. But you never can tell. You just can't predict it. But if the figures, if the lull that we have is sustained, then it would land you in the region of 120 something. But if there's any escalation, it could go above that.
What is the cause for concern? I mean, we've read Indecom's report, but from where you sit, looking at these figures and certainly the increase, and by the way, to our listeners, since Indecom was established in 2010, we saw a low, an all-time low, I believe it was 2016, 2017,
Right.
to 86.
And we wish that the 2019,
2019,
figure,
yes.
right, would repeat itself. That has been our only year of under 100, and we are hoping and praying for a repetition in terms of that number. But since the commencement of Indecom, the general trajectory has been a 50% decline compared to pre-Indecom.
Yeah.
But fluctuating, 120 something, 130 something, 119, etc.
So cause for concern when you look at the steady increase?
Any loss of life is a cause of concern. And you and I know there are some powers that the security forces have, and you would love to know that in each instance, then all the use of force guidelines are followed, all the steps to ensure that somebody who is injured gets medical attention expeditiously.
You know, one of the things, Mr. Faulkner, we have citizens that would tag both JFJ's Instagram and Indecom's page. And for example, just today, when you look at the unfortunate incidents down by Salt Spring with those 2 9-year-olds,
Yes.
and people would ask, what is Indecom talking about with less lethal force? How would you respond to that when we talk about using less lethal force and ensuring that people have access to medical attention and so on, notwithstanding who we believe that accused or perpetrator would be? How would you respond to citizens of that criticism?
Right. I have contemplated that position, Michael. And the right to life that the citizen has to be observed by the citizen and has to be observed by law enforcement themselves, because law enforcement is a trained entity who's in the execution of their duties. You anticipate that all the human rights procedures will be observed. But I believe that in any society where crime is a challenge, there will be persons who believe that the police should have a free hand to be judge, to be jury, and to be executioner. So one might have to be sympathetic to that position, but through sensitization we'll be seeking to adjust that view.
You know, one of the things we've made public from JFJ is a very similar position. That of course, if the security forces rather, are confronted by armed criminals, then the use of force policy clearly outlines what should be done as they protect their own lives and those who may be in close proximity
Yes.
to what is happening. What is unfortunate, however, and we've heard statements from public officials, but again from citizens, criticizing still what we're saying, and they have argued again for the security forces to use excesses and kill anybody. And I've articulated many times that the security forces, in protecting themselves, it is important for the body-worn cameras to be so worn by them, to be deployed and worn, because the footage would protect the security forces but also the citizens. So let me ask you this, Mr. Faulkner. You say 119 to date. How many of these incidents that you've reported on in your quarterly report that you've gotten footage of?
Right. Now, the 119, Mikhail, relates to fatalities.
Yes.
In none of the fatalities was there an instance, because we make it our duty. An officer is allegedly involved in an incident that leads to loss of life, leads to injury. They're interviewed. And we ensure that we inquire. One, were you trained in the use of a body-worn camera? Were you issued with a body-worn camera? And were you deployed? Were you using,
Yes.
actually, the body-worn camera? And in zero instance did we have a case where a body-worn camera was used or, from my recollection, deployed. In our half-yearly report, we had a combination of 106 shooting incidents allegedly by the security forces. That's to the end of June.
Yes.
In that 106, one instance, an officer indicated that he was using a body-worn camera. And that case was a shooting injury. It didn't lead to a fatality.
You know, I had the privilege on JFJ's behalf to visit several police divisions in the United States. And I won't compare apples and oranges because the resource constraints in Jamaica is clearly evident. But their protocol was quite good, I believe. So, for example, if a shooting were to occur today, then the protocol dictates that the police head would have a media conference actually within 24 hours where the footage is released to the media. And in those instances, whatever the disciplinary actions or sanctions are, it is also made public. What would be your recommendation to the police leadership in terms of how body-worn cameras are not only deployed, but are utilized, and how disciplinary sanctions are imposed? What would be your recommendation in that regard?
Well, in terms of body-worn cameras, the operating procedures are within the hands of the security forces. The pronouncements with regard to the procurement, we cannot question that. We cannot challenge that.
Let me verify, you have no way of verifying.
I think that's an inventory and an audit that would require an audit process from within the security forces themselves. But one of the better tests for us is we get complaints of injuries, shooting. Let us see whether the procurement reflects itself in the actual operations, planned or unplanned. And what we can say is that it does not reflect a wide dispersion.
Yes. And, for our listeners, JFJ's previous leadership under Roger Malcolm, they did actually a timeline of the announcements about the procurement of body-worn cameras. And I think we should update it. It's timely because just this year alone, we were told about another 400. And for those who are listening in, just to indicate, under the Zones of Special Operations Act, it actually legislated that body-worn cameras should be utilized. JFJ, we did some request of the JDF, and the JDF indicated that their officers are actually wearing the body-worn cameras. But I'm not sure from where Indecom sits in instances where you may have JDF officers involved, if you've managed to get any footage or anything to verify what happened on the ground.
Right, so the Indecom mandate captures the work of the JDF when they are working in concert and in tandem with the JCF. And, we have no challenge because there is the verbal commitment. Mm-hmm. But what Indecom is requiring is that the verbal commitment be elevated to practical display of that verbal commitment. Mm-hmm. And we have not seen that.
And that verbal commitment is from whom?
Well, we are willing to take the commitment, whether from the political directorate, but because in the public space and in our consultation processes, we were advised that in the 2023 to 2024 financial year, that the deployment of resources would have been expanded to significantly increase the portfolio of body-worn cameras. Mm-hmm. I can't say, in all honesty, that I've seen that manifested. And in fact, our reports would contradict any such manifestation. Mm-hmm. In terms of the zones of special operation, I too welcome the provisions regarding the wearing of body-worn cameras. But if you look at the section, it is not as strictly mandatory because it adds subject to resource availability.
Yes. So
that removes it, in our view, from mandatory to discretionary.
Yes. And, the ZOZO, it has been touted as a human rights approach to crime fighting. For those who have an opportunity to read that piece of legislation, human rights is spelled right throughout. But there are still concerns about it when we have these types of discussion, because in a lot of the ZOZO areas, you also have SOEs that were declared, so it overlaps. And that is also something that JFJ finds problematic, because you have one legislation saying one thing, but we know what the Emergency Powers Act, as articulated in the SOE regulations, also provide for. So we're going to take the break. I think we have a few more minutes, but just to let our listeners know, we're going to continue the discussion with Mr. Faulkner. We're going to focus and segue on persons with mental illness or different types of mental health issues, 16 of whom were killed during the reporting year so far, and then we're going to focus on those in lockups. We take the break.
The new KFC Nuggets. Delicious, crispy, juicy, original recipe nuggets. With KFC Nuggets, you'll never settle for less. The time by KFC Nuggets is
1:30.
At Guardian General, we believe you can keep driving on the road without driving up your insurance premium. Simply because our third-party policies are made to fit your pocket perfectly and give you peace of mind. Plus, you get extra benefits such as windscreen coverage and further discounts when you pay your premium in full. Pay online or at any Guardian General office island-wide. What are you waiting for? Call us at 888-468-3474 for a free quote today. Live safe. Live easy.
KFC, news flash, everybody hear this. KFC bringing you the brand new nuggets. Nip it, bite it, enjoy it. Laid with real chicken, there's no other like this. This is the game changer. This is what we want. Choose the original recipe flavor. Tastes so good. KFC finger licking good. Brand new nugget. The new KFC nuggets. Delicious, crispy, juicy, original recipe nuggets made with 100% white meat. With KFC nuggets, you'll never settle for less. KFC, the real nuggets. It's finger-licking good.
Watch on, man, you don't know this advice at the end present for The Bridge 99 FM connecting. We said that station, you're a leader. I will say, get him like a time, a like a feature. Under the moonlight and sense of me, yeah. The Bridge 99 FM, Diana representing.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans, for justice. The people's champion, champion, champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're joined by Mr. Hugh Faulkner, who is the Commissioner of Indecom. And we're looking at Indecom's last quarter report, and that went up to June, Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
And we were just having discussions about the levels of fatal shootings involving police officers in particular, and we were having discussions about body-worn cameras. And before we segue into those with mental health issues, you know, Mr. Faulkner, you said a number of things around the body-worn cameras, and I just want to reiterate it for the listeners. The concerns that we have here at JFJ is that we have heard the announcements time and time again. I think from the previous administration was in office, and you had former Minister Peter Bunting at the time. We heard about body-worn cameras being purchased, and it continued into the current administration. And despite all of these grand announcements, and again some comments from our current Minister of National Security, what the media has dubbed shoot-to-kill comments, the fact that we do not have body-worn cameras, the footage from those, or the body-worn cameras not actually being worn by law enforcement is quite a cause of concern. And for the purposes of ensuring that our listeners are keeping up with what is being said, the body-worn cameras are here to protect both citizens and law enforcement. In a number of these images and the footages on social media that we've seen, I think there was one, Mr. Faulkner, I'm not sure if it came to Indecom's attention. JFJ was tagged where you saw an individual being shot. I think that was about a week ago. I'm not sure if you saw that one.
Yes, go ahead.
But the concern I'm having, though, we're depending on citizens' regular phone camera to help us. Where are those body-worn cameras? I think it goes right back to the importance of it, because it would help to bring the matter conclusively to an end, protect both officers and civilians.
Right. I support that analysis, Mikhail, because the use of body-worn cameras, it goes to the heart of justice itself. You know, technology sometimes provides an answer to the failings of human recollection. A body-worn camera and CCTV, etc., would all assist you.
Yes.
In terms of capturing the details and the chronology of an event. The body-worn camera, barring tampering, barring editing, is not embellishing, is not biased. It just captures what took place. And this goes well to the process of investigation and the process of court determination. Because in many instances, it can assist you with investigation. And where the matter goes to court, it could be admissible. And I have to thank, Mikhail, those persons who have been willing, many times without invitation, to send to Indecom the footage.
That's good, yes.
Because even if that person is not willing to come forward, it can guide you, whether it was a red car involved, it can guide you as to the license plate, so it can assist you in the investigative process.
Yes, yes.
And it can assist you in determining where truth lies, where culpability or where exoneration lies.
Yes.
So it is valuable. So the three main things: one, identify the author, the maker of it. That's what, if it goes to court, the court would like. 2, was the instrument in good working condition? And 3, was the subject to tampering, editing?
Yes.
And if you pass that 3-point test, then it could be
Yes.
admissible and assist the process of justice. What it does now, it removes speculation. Because in one instance, we believe if there was a body-worn camera, then the public suspicion of something happening in a lockup could have been strengthened or dissipate.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, but just recently we saw the situation in Raytown where citizens were saying one thing with those 2 young men who
Indeed.
were fishermen. So
Right.
again, it brings home the importance of having it. The matter of those with mental health issues, Mr. Faulkner, those 16 persons who were killed, what is your concern about that particular area?
Right. So, in fact, just a little bit of clarity, Michael. In the first half of the year, there were 106 persons who are combined, shot and killed or injured.
Yes.
And of that, 12 were mentally ill. Not all died.
Okay.
Don't have the figures with me now, but 12 were injured. And in those cases, in each instance, the mentally ill person was alleged to have been armed with a machete, armed with a knife, or armed with an ice pick.
So nothing too intimidating.
Right, and we accept that a machete could lead to fatality,
Yes.
a knife and ice pick, but not beyond the security forces, in my view, to utilize other tactical measures to disarm and not to necessarily go for the most lethal weapon. So this is where we are seeking a change, a cultural change. And again, to be fair, let me acknowledge that the security forces deal with a number of matters with the mentally ill, hundreds
Yes.
per year. But those that result in death or injury must be investigated by Indecom, and we have to look at those. The mentally ill is not the best representative of him or her own interest. An oversight body is there as the watchdog for the citizen, and also to ensure that fairness transpires, which affects not only the complainant, but also the security forces. And so the mentally ill will be documenting these confrontations and repeatedly stating them so that we encourage the use. Because you could very well go in our court of law and you are successful with self-defense with
Yes.
a mentally ill man with machete and knife.
Because to be fair to the police, they may not be aware going in that person necessarily had
that
a
could be
mental
the
health
case.
issue.
That could be the case. But we are saying where there are a number of officers, there are tactical measures that can be deployed to disarm.
But let me ask you, Mr. Faulkner, ask the question, where are the body-worn cameras? Let me ask you the question, where are those less lethal weapons that we're talking about, the tasers, and
Right,
so
so the
on?
baton is you could utilize a baton. You
Yes.
can picture that. Somebody armed with a knife, a machete, and a baton could be used. Also, the pepper spray or the chemical irritant, as some people call it, could also be utilized. And you get a greater control of the
And the police, they
situation.
have these?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So and
I can tell you how widespread the distribution of tasers are.
But I think that is the concern for citizens. How widespread is that distribution? Do every officer walk with those pepper spray? Every officers, when they're called for these types of incidents, do they have the
in terms of
baton?
The kit and the uniform that the officers are being designed. These uniforms are designed to have
Yes.
the pepper spray.
So based on
baton,
your investigation
holster.
of these specific incidents, are you able to indicate whether or not they were wearing and equipped with these?
There have been instances where we have investigated the use of pepper spray because
Yes.
even that we use because there are instances when it may not be necessary.
Yes.
So there are instances when officers are armed with pepper spray. Tasers are infrequent. We come across. We make the inquiries nevertheless. And body-worn cameras, infrequent.
So does it come down to the training, perhaps? Because I've heard officers made public calls that they need to be trained in how to deal with those with mental health issues so that they can better respond.
Yes, we have made that recommendation. And even with regard to those who are ill and in custody, that the training gears the officers to persons who are incarcerated or in lockups and who have to attend to at least the usual first aid and other methods. When we speak of training, we expand that. So we capture accidental discharge of firearm, Michael.
Oh, and that is something that's frequent enough? How many?
Yes, during the period January to June 2023, January to June, there were 13 times the firearm of law enforcement officers discharged accidentally. And in 5 of those incidents, 6 officers were injured. So we ensure that we capture the data and we advise the requisite arm of the security forces because we believe this calls for further training, further exposure.
These
to
are young
ballistics.
officers in most of...
The age span is wide. Age span is wide. And by the end of September, we had 23 overall discharge of accidental discharge of firearm and 9 incidents where 9 of the 23 incidents, in 9 of those incidents, 9 officers were injured. And you realize, thank God you were injured, but we know that the outcome could have been less or more. So that too, we point to the security forces.
The need for that
safety,
ongoing training.
for the officers themselves and for the public.
Yes. And before we take the break and we get into the discussion around the state of our lockups, I know that the officers would get some amount of psychosocial counseling and so on, and the need for training. Do you make recommendations for the psychosocial component?
No, that's for the JCF and their chaplaincy, welfare unit, and professional development branch.
Because, one of the things, Mr. Faulkner, we've gotten complaints, some anonymously, from those officers within the JCF at JFJ. And one of the things, I remember an officer calling the office and they indicated that, listen, the crime rate is high, they're working long hours, they're placed under tents in the hot sun. And they said sometimes the citizens are disrespectful, they have family life challenges, and when they put all of that together, this is what the officer is saying, that they said they need some mental health support.
Yeah, well, Michael, in terms of the diagnosis for psychosocial intervention, we do not make that. But what we have done is to identify to the security forces, not just the JCF, but the DCS also. An officer, he comes up in repeat cases of assault. His name comes up in repeat cases of fatal shooting or shooting injury. Does that tell you anything? Could this be an officer who is crying out for help, for assistance?
Or at the very least to be held accountable as well if you see that name popping up.
Indeed.
Yes.
Well, we're dealing with the accountability for the actions.
Absolutely.
But it can also indicate to the JCF, if you have an officer at this particular station, several other officers, but he has, for example, 9 or 13 assaults.
Yes.
Does that tell you that some assessment needs to be done?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we take the break and then we pick up with state of lockups and the matter of repeat offenders, if you could call it that. So we return shortly.
Up and Go, the Diaspora's #1 morning show, right here on The Bridge, 99 FM. Up and Go brings borderless connections in real time and covers the latest news, people's views, and entertainment features like no other. Wake up with us. We've got you covered. 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. We give you more in the morning, right here on The Bridge, 99 FM.
We up, yeah. Free Ethiopia.
Calling all bridge builders to the Bridge 99 FM, your global partners for outside broadcasts, connecting you from Jamaica to the world.
Where will we go?
From Kingston to Portmore, downtown, Spanish Town, Canada, USA, and as far as Dubai, we keep you connected across the 7 continents of the globe.
Call us at 876-630-3153 for information about partnering with the Bridge 99 FM.
That's 876-630-3153 to take your outside broadcasts to the world.
You understand, I'm a maestro and I represent for which FM? Bridge FM, really rich FM.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're here with Mr. Hugh Faulkner, the Commissioner of Indecom, and we're talking about some of the main findings in their last quarter report. So we had some discussions earlier about the number of fatal shootings, the lack of body-worn cameras. We segued into having discussions about those who are mentally ill or those with mental health challenges, rather. But now I want us to shift focus, Mr. Faulkner, about the state of lockups. Within our organization at JFJ, we've seen an increase in the number of complaints about the state of lockups across the island. I won't call the specific names now, but the complaints vary, and I think they're quite similar to what you have outlined in the Indecom's report. So can you just paint a picture for our listeners? What are some of the concerns based on your complaints received, as well as any visits that the Indecom investigative officers would have had?
Right. Well, we have seen in a number of instances, and I must concede that in some cases, persons who are very ill have been discharged from a hospital and returned to a lockup. Not in any case or standard of recovery, still very ill. And when that very ill person returns to somewhere that is poor lighting, poor ventilation, poor sanitation, and in one of the incidents that we investigated in the western part of Jamaica, there was one functioning toilet for about 6 cells. And so with that kind of environment, you are more likely to worsen than to recover. So that may be outside of the JCF, because if a hospital just discharge you, the JCF cannot argue the discharge, etc. But that person. So the best way you can address that, in my view, is to ensure that your purpose-built facilities increase and improve with the requisite medical areas. Just like how some of the correctional facilities have their medical area, have a doctor, most days have medical orderlies, etc. But in terms of the lockups, it's a different kettle of fish. We believe that there should be a designated officer, and we have recommended this, and the reports go to the security forces and it goes to Parliament. A designated officer to ensure that the sanitation fixtures are repaired, are maintained, that the CCTV infrastructure, not to violate the privacy of anyone, but that are necessary to ensure that the safety of those in custody, which becomes the responsibility of the state, those CCTV cameras can't be just a fixture that is non-functional.
Yes, because that's a concern, because your report indicated that they weren't functioning.
Right. In one of the cases, we believe that officers could have picked up certain things happening, and can even picked up if somebody collapses.
Yes. Right?
Even if you're sitting at a desk, it can give you a lot of information in real time.
One of the things, Mr. Faulkner, I remember with the incident done by Ocherius couple months ago, there was a debate between the JCF and DCS about who is responsible and who is not. I'm not sure if you heard that debate.
With regard to?
Who is responsible for detainees?
Well, the DCS, is a body that responds to a court order.
Yes.
And they have different functions, Mikhail. The JCF has the power of arrest. The JCF can have you detained. The JCF can have you charged and can consider bail. The DCS is like a body that is responsible for persons who have been convicted, but that has been expanded to include persons who have been detained, especially for psychiatric evaluation. A policeman who is at court and the person who he has charged is not at court, the judge can ask him to go to the police station and bring that person. The person who is at the correctional facility, DCS, a writ has to be issued by the court for that person to be brought to court. The police couldn't just go there and get that person. So again, so that helps you to delineate the responsibilities.
But it was just interesting listening in on that debate on the radio program where the DCS is making it very clear that, listen, some of these persons have not yet been convicted of a crime. It's not our jurisdiction. The JCF must assume responsibility. But the JCF is saying ultimately it ought to be DCS. So I think that clarity is needed between the two agencies, I believe, at some point, because you have individuals who are falling through the cracks, if you will, but it's something for further probing. But it was just an interesting conversation.
Yes,
listening
indeed.
To both entities. It was on Nationwide, I believe, they were having that interview. So something to probe. But your recommendation, Mr. Faulkner, about the challenges and so on, how have they been taken, whether it be the state of lockups or so on? Are any of the recommendations from Indecom being implemented?
Well, we had done a previous report on the conditions in the correctional facilities. And to be fair, the DCS had reported and they provided us with the number of persons trained in terms of the custodial and medical care. Plus, we had done a report on the over 60 persons in the correctional facilities, and thank God now there is somewhat of a hospice for those who are seriously ill and aged. So there has been some infrastructural changes reported by the DCS. The JCF, I acknowledge there have been a few newly built stations. So I would anticipate that in those that the conditions are improved. But you must have to implement the maintenance regime and the accountability regime for your cameras and your fixtures, etc. So we'll see what will be the response from this new report on the JCF. Indecom had previously done one in 2013. And now this one, we find a number of the violations and omissions that we found in 2013 are still there.
You know, Mr. Faulkner, the last time Indecom had a report, I think it was in December, I believe, you indicated that there were some officers, the names keep popping up. I think about 14, the report had indicated. And the report also made mention that recommendations were made to the police high command. Are you in a position to indicate what the outcome of any conversations, if any?
Right. Now, we just have to watch the data, Mikhail.
So no meeting or
and
anything?
To see, we have at least we have letter and email correspondence from time to time, but we ensure that we meet at least once per year with all our stakeholders, so DPP, DCS, JCF, JDF, Police Federation, and the last instance, the Institute of Forensic Science, because we send a lot of exhibits. So all our stakeholders we meet in, and we do raise these matters, and we continue to tabulate them. So again, now we'll track latest data. Are these names coming up? Because remember, I tell you, when an officer name is repetitively emerging, it could tell you that some evaluation may be needed.
Yes.
Stress may be there.
And I can understand that for those who are involved in assault, but when you have repetition for those who are involved in fatal shootings, I think that's another issue completely. And
right, because for the officer's own well-being, there are residues of stress that may be evident. And so for the safety of the officer, safety of colleagues, and the safety of the public of Jamaica, sometimes the security forces may have to review whether this officer ought to be withdrawn.
Yes. I'm not sure if you're able to give a public update, and it's fine if you aren't, on Teron Hewitt, who was killed last year down by Denham Town, shot in the back by a JDF officer.
Right. I can't recall where that investigation is, but one thing with Indecom, we complete, once we get all the forensic certificates and forensic reports, we do a commission reports and complete our matters.
And then it is referred possibly to...
And then we give a summary of the reports at the back of our quarterly reports.
Okay.
So Mr. Hewitt's case would definitely go through all the investigative processes. And if somebody is to be charged, then we make that recommendation to the DPP for a ruling. Or if
and I'm not putting you on the spot about a
right.
specific case, but we're keen on understanding where the status of that particular one.
Right. So being a fatality, it would be attracting all the requisite attention.
All right. The last thing, Mr. Faulkner, I'm not sure if you're watching the legislative landscape, and we've noted some of the issues with lockups and so on. Did Indecom put any proposal forward on Bail Act, the mandatory minimum, and what the possible outcomes could be?
No, we left that to the legislature, JFJ, etc. We tend not to, present, we are independent and we are mandated by law to be objective, and we are mandated by law to be impartial. So you might not see us descend into the arena of those positions. We comply with the law.
Sure, but we've heard from the DPP and her office, for example, and the possible...
So we have not established that...
policy recommendation unit.
Right, so we have done it in some instances where it touches oversight.
Okay.
And we have suggested that, yes, consider bail. Reduce your overcrowding. Consider bail for persons who are charged malicious destruction of property, assault at common law, etc. Some of those offenses. And we have made recommendations. As you know, we were one of the lead voices because of the DCS and our oversight for juvenile facilities, for the removal of Section 24 of the Child Care and Protection Act. And we are recommending that Section 15 of the Corrections Act, where a correctional officer can utilize lethal weaponry as someone who is escaping. We do not believe that that sits well with the 2011 version of our Charter of Rights.
Yes, I remember Indecom saying it.
Indeed.
We're up on time now, but thank you so much, Mr. Faulkner, for joining us and staying with us for almost an hour.
Indeed.
We appreciate it. Our winner on Instagram is Saji. That is it. So the Indecom Act is the Act of 2010. Did it come into effect that same year, Mr. Faulkner?
Yes, Indecom commenced in 2010.
Okay, so the listener is actually correct then.
Right, so the Passing, etc. might have been 2009, but
Okay.
still within that ballpark.
All right. Thank you so much to our listeners. We appreciate you always. See you next week. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director. Have a good Tuesday.
For justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
You understand, I'm a maestro and I represent for which FM? Bridge FM, real rich FM.
If you're in business, get on the bridge. 876-669-5000. If you're in business, get on the bridge. 876